So I almost don't want to say much on the show about this movie you recommended because I sort of just want to recommend it to people. You
Yeah,
know,
I feel the same way.
like a
Yeah.
long time ago, Andrew and Liza asked me if we would talk about this book on this podcast, and I talked to you about it. It took quite a while for it to come out in Australia, so that was part of the delay. And somewhere in there, you said like, "Oh, maybe we should pair it with this movie, Compartment Number Six, which won some prize at Cannes a year or two ago." And I only finally saw it this weekend, and it is really great. Like I'm such a cynical movie viewer, and I have like a special hatred for feel good movies, and this like genuinely warmed my heart. So
Yeah,
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 like it's
well, I'm
like
really glad you
yeah,
liked it.
yeah. It's like the like anti, it's like the anti matter version of like Before Sunrise. But
Absolutely.
yeah, like if you listen to this podcast and are somebody who wants to have your heart warmed, I guess I don't. It's just a really strange, good movie called Compartment Number Six. It's like Russian, Estonian, Finnish.
Yes, and if you are frustrated by Couplets by Maggie Milner, I think Compartment Number Six is the perfect reply to this book and to the Before series and to Chasing Amy and
Oh God, yeah, I hadn't
a
even
whole
thought
bunch
about
of
that.
stuff. Whole
Yeah,
bunch of stuff.
it's she also like in a sort of under. I mean, it's she's Finnish, and so and like it's everything's different, but like the lead definitely looked like a good deal like My College Girlfriend, which probably affected my take of it. But it's uh
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Well, you're not
Um
objective at all then.
no,
Yeah.
yeah. But it I mean like it yeah, I was surprised by it. Um
Well, yeah, let's not say anything else about it because it's weirdly possible to spoil, even though almost nothing happens. But
yeah.
strong recommend.
Yeah. Yeah. It we and the Cannes Film Festival discovered this tiny this tiny movie.
Yeah, yeah,
Um
but mostly us.
I'm Matthew Buckley Smith, and you're listening to SLEERICKETS. Thank you for listening. And if you like the show and you would like to hear more of it, or if you'd like to hear the the messier or more rabbit hole-ish material, then go to sleerickets.substack.com and check out the secret show. This week, I'm talking with Alice about the 2023 critical darling Couplets by Maggie Milner, a love story in verse and or prose poetry. It's I think it was touted as being a love story in rhyming couplets. It is there are a lot of rhyming couplets in it, or at least lines that rhyme in pairs. Alice and I get into all of the details of it and our really mixed like honestly genuinely mixed reactions to it. This topic was recommended by Andrew Palmer, former guest author of The Bachelor, among other things. This book, Couplets by Maggie Milner, came out like a year ago. Is that right? A year in the
Earlier
States.
this year. Yeah, June
Um,
in Australia.
yeah, so it might have been before the new year in no 2023. So it came out, yeah, I guess right after the new year in the US and was widely acclaimed. It is categorized as what is it categorized as?
A love
Poetry.
story.
Well, yeah, it's called Couplets: a Love Story by Maggie Milner. It is filed under poetry, so there is a lot of prose in it, and it seemed like the audience being pitched by a lot of the ecstatic coverage, was not necessarily primarily a poetry audience.
Yeah, this is the same crowd that's going to read and hand around Bluets by Maggie Nelson,
Yeah,
which I
yeah,
really
yeah,
do like.
yeah.
But it's that same kind of book. I was just watching a talk that Maggie Milner gave at Brown a couple of months ago, and she said that she wrote this in lockdown and wasn't thinking about it being published at all. I don't know if I really believe that, but yeah, it's become
Oh,
something of a sensation.
she's she's extremely well connected. Like just like glancing over her by, like, she's a very well connected New York person. I don't know if she never thought about it being published. And boy, that is some author photo.
Yeah,
But
she's in a
it's
white t-shirt
yeah,
in bed.
like very looking extremely comfortable. Yeah. So, do you want to say briefly a word about what Bluets is? I know Joanna read it, and she's a Maggie Nelson fan broadly. Maggie Nelson is like written in a couple different genres: fiction, nonfiction, poetry, sort of stuff. What is Bluet specifically?
Bluets is a breakup book written in prose poems. The organizing idea is that Maggie Nelson keeps returning to the color blue and where it comes from, where it appears, but she's also working through this horrendous breakup with this guy and also a horrible accident that happened to a friend of hers.
Hmm.
It's really wonderful. It's a really wonderful book. And I don't know if Maggie Milner would have had it in mind, but it does feel like Couplets is kind of like the little baby sister to that book.
Yeah. Do you know the Kieślowski movie? Because there's a
Yeah,
car
yeah,
wreck.
it's one of my favorite films. Yeah.
Right. It's like there's a car wreck right before that movie, I think,
Right. Yeah.
that her husband
Yeah. No,
dies
you're
in.
right. That's the start of the film. I didn't actually put that together.
Yeah. And great, yeah,
Good
great
point.
Juliette Binoche movie. Yeah, okay. So right. So this is it is I feel like several I read this expecting it to be just very bad and annoying. And the cover, I think the Australian cover is similar, but the American cover is red, white, and pink. And now that I think of
Yeah,
it, this might have been a Valentine's Day release.
that makes
But
sense.
I was expecting it to be extremely cloying and irritating. And it's not that it wasn't at all that. Like, I had a very split response to this book. And I feel
Me
like
too.
so much depends on what you were expecting and what you are comparing it to.
Yeah, exactly. No, I had a totally ambivalent response to it. The first couple of pages are covered in really bitchy notes from me being like, what are you doing? What are you even talking about? And then she kind of just hypnotizes me. And by the end, I'm just like turning pages going, all right, give me more. What else are you going to tell me? Yeah, it's not all bad. My expectation going into it was that it would be, and that it would be kind of unbearable for me to read about this particular experience. Let me read some of it because I really think it's good for people to have as much of this in their
Yes.
ears before we start digging into it.
Yes.
So I'm going to
Indeed.
read the 1.5 where she basically outlines where the story begins.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I asked to sleep with women. At first, he agreed. If that's what you think you need, he said, I wouldn't want to stop you. But shortly after that, he asked me not to. Maybe I was too far gone already. Floodgates, barn door, whatever. Or maybe the vow I made then. Nope, I never will again. Predicted, in a way, its own subversion by establishing a rule that I could break. In middle school, I once got suspended for a hall pass I'd stolen and then forged after skipping class to make out with the boy I'd barely met, who groped my still imaginary breasts beneath my shirt. Afterward, I remember most of all my parents' shame, their somber faces, which erased the aphrodisiac of misbehavior. Looking back, sometimes I suspect that the appeal was in the rule breaking, e.g., to steal, to cut the class, to lie, which was itself the sex. That lust to me was wanting to transgress beside another, to be so totally compelled, to share a truth you have to lie to tell. So she is in a relationship with a man at the start of the book, and she really feels that she needs to sleep with a woman. She asks for his permission. He
And I forget,
initially
does
says
she
yes,
meet the
then he says
specific
no.
woman before that?
No,
Or
it's just
just
she's
has a
having a lot
feeling?
of really hectic sex dreams about women, and
Oh,
she's
right,
just
right,
like, I
right. Yeah, yeah.
really think I need to do this. And so then she goes and has a drink with a woman. It's a platonic meetup, but there's an attraction. She sleeps with that woman, comes home, tells her boyfriend, the relationship breaks down, and she spends the rest of the book in a state of torture trying to be with this woman who's also with somebody else. And it just sounds truly awful.
Yeah, if I recall, she says like, I told him almost right away, and then like a few pages later, you find out she slept with her like 6 times before telling him. But yeah,
Well, I think they've had an extended sleepover. I do want to read that section as well.
yeah, it's broken into books and sections, and it's both. What you read was written in loose, uh, rhyming couplets, loose as in meter and in rhyme, and then alternating with those irregularly are prose sections. The in addition to the formal difference, the verse sections are written in the first person and the prose sections are written in the second person, and then
Yeah,
all of those are then further broken into these larger books and movements.
yeah, yeah. So this is 110. I told my boyfriend immediately. I've never been too good at secrecy. It was the final straw before we parted. She'll make you suffer in the end, he said. Not meanly, but as if reporting something true about women in love and what they do. Like the line breaks, like they're just a bit embarrassing sometimes to read,
Yeah,
but
they're
it's not all bad. It's not all
no, no.
terrible. She has some moments of really nailing it and some moments of just like catastrophic failure.
Well, right. So like it's the rhyme is very irregular. It's a lot of assonant rhyme, some true rhyme,
Mm,
some kind of conceptual rhyme, some like anagram rhyme, cloud could, some like very loose. Like she writes thinking with addiction, and sometimes she'll just sort of rhyme. Like you'll have kind of the final consonant sound will be roughly the same. So they're very loose rhymes, and that with the
mm.
meter, which is effectively non-existent, means that often the rhymes are completely inaudible. But as you said, like both in the cleaner instances of her meter and rhyme and in some of the looser ones, there are some really good moments. They're like
Mm.
very good lines, and then just god awful mortifying lines.
Yeah,
And they're
like in the
just
same poem.
she just keeps them all, and then some are just like extremely prosy, barely anything other than just prose lopped off, when you get roughly to like what looks like the same length. And it's just, I mean, I found it very hard every time I've gone back and looked through any passage from this book, with the exception of maybe some of the like the proem little thing, not because it's necessarily more polished, just because it seems sort of deliberate in some ways. It is very difficult for me to imagine her doing any drafts. Like the whole thing feels very much like a first draft.
That's something I wrote down too. What do you, where are the sections that you like? Can you pull out one that you actually enjoy, or
Yeah,
there's
let
like a
me.
line that you like?
Yeah, I can't remember what the situation was, but I think I did not have a pen when I was reading this, and so I dog-eared things and then wasn't able to underline them. But I was going back through the sections I dog-eared.
So I think one of those that you dog eared, I also thought, yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, I like this all right. Though it's not. It is rather loose. When I was with her, the physical experience of my pleasure, the little death, seemed to make the nauseous question of whether I was in possession of a clear and unified self mostly irrelevant. Those days I was something else, a soft vacuity, a sort of net, no guilt, no age, no epithet. Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
partly like it's a very steamy story with a lot of very physical details, and she does have a tendency to drift off into little reveries where she describes little like mental visual games she'll play, like watching clouds or watching like the dust motes in her eyes, and you're like, what are you fucking doing? Get back to the story. But then it does feel like here there's a kind of a nice tension between like the attempt to make some kind of abstract sense out of this and just the overwhelming experience of the physical reality. Oh, I liked this too. Some mornings leaving my girlfriend's house, I'd glimpse my whole existence, all its eras as a single arc, unified, unbroken. I saw a person who kissed mostly men, wrote poems in the prevailing style, owned a cat. I saw a different person after that. Yeah, I mean, I think like when she is sort of reflecting honestly on the kind of the bafflement of the situation, or when she's just straight ahead telling a story, it's pretty good. Her control of lines and her, I mean, it's in a way like this would be maybe the best version of this book would be in translation into another language by a really skillful poet.
Mm.
Like
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
Yeah, there aren't that many priceless lines. There aren't that many passages that are like, oh, this is verse gold. But the other part, like reading this with form in my head, I was constantly frustrated.
I
There's
bet.
tons and tons and tons of bad rhyme, bad meter, bad couplet, bad verse writing, bad, technique throughout.
Yep.
But reading it, having also read a bunch of contemporary poetry books, like this was interesting. Like this one, I was like, oh, I want to read the next section because there's a story and I want to find out what happens next.
Absolutely. Yeah, she does hypnotize you. It's interesting though that you say you want it in translation, because that's what I keep asking myself reading this. I'm like, why does this book exist? Like, it's sexy, and Maggie Milner is sexy and famous, but like, does this story need to be told again?
Oh, definitely not. I mean, I don't think there's anything essential about this, but I think lining this up next to lots of other poetry books, like lots of poetry books with very good technique that I've read in recent years that were still deadly boring to read and had no engine of any kind moving them along. Like it wasn't even like, like really good collections of poetry don't have a plot. They don't have that same momentum throughout, but they do have a like, ooh, that was really, ooh, like that had some bite. That landed. Like that was really satisfying. I want to read another one like that.
Mm.
There are just very few books of poetry I read where I'm excited to read more. And in this one, I don't think there was anything necessary about it, but it was hard after finishing this to say, like, this was more gratuitous than like your average poetry collection. It
Yeah, and
was silly
necessary.
and trivial, but it was like, it was fun to read.
It was fun. It's super fun. Yeah, and I kind of hate that I framed it in terms of necessity, because that's just silly.
Sure, yeah. It's what's
But
the Stallings. It's what's unnecessary that makes us human.
yeah. So forget that bit. But I just can't help thinking about it in terms of like she's telling a queer story, and I think all the time about, we were just talking about that film Compartment Number 6. I love the way, I love that version of this story of moving between genders. And I don't know. She's interrogated her motivations really well. I don't know that she has said anything about the gender stuff that I'm at all satisfied with. But let me read one little bit here that might contradict me. Okay, so this is about love, the bit where she's talking about basically being with a guy. There are many ways, of course, of telling it, but each account obscures some other version equally true. One is that I lied to everyone I knew. Another, this one I really do believe, is that for years I loved him more than me. I can conjure even now our first apartment's tile, white diamonds in their blue argyle frieze around the sink, the dirty grout I'd scour with a toothbrush while he was out at work. I can count 4 bath mats over 8 years, hear the record player catch every time we stood up from the table, and I can still feel the invisible moat we both believed in, on the other side of which we knew lay torment, exile, wreckage, the anarchy of singledom. Loss upon loss. I remember testing it, the moat, throwing across a rope to check its breadth, twice to the waist, wading in, before retreating, shamefaced, reining myself back in. To him, it was a sea, I think, entirely impassable. To me, it was a dizzying ravine that circled us for years, then cut between. I do like that as a bit of a summation of, I don't know, I don't really know what that's
Yeah,
long-term straight love.
I think the like another part of my what the way I was primed going into this was hearing that it was a queer story, and that it was about a woman who was with a man and then discovering wanting to be with another woman. I think, perhaps unfairly, I was I was prepared for a male ogre who was the terrible villain, and stood in her way and didn't let her discover herself, and then she found the truth, and that was what really liberated her. And in a way, like it is a, I mean, I guess it's a queer book in that it's about woman having an affair with another woman, but it's really a book about a relationship and about kind of a quarter life crisis. Like it's like looking back at the beginning, because there's like a surprising amount of time spent in the book, even later on, reflecting on the collapse of that first relationship with the guy who is she's extraordinarily fair to. Like he comes off as like a basically decent guy that she doesn't treat very well, and then she moves on, and there's this other thing, and the lesbian she hooks up with is kind of a cad, if I recall. Like,
Really, really sounds like a difficult person to be with. Yeah. The
yeah,
book is dedicated to Nick. And I
yeah,
keep wondering if that's the first boyfriend and if this book is a bit of an extended apology in a way.
yeah. I mean, it does feel like, even listening to that passage you just read, it does seem to me that it, like, in part, she certainly does, kind of discover this thing about herself and explore this thing, and she has these dreams about being with women. But it also seems like she sort of was, she was like a woman in need of a crisis. Like she needed something to blow things up, and this was sort of the form that it took.
Yeah. That's why I like the 8 bath mats in 4 years detail.
Yeah.
That's a lot of bath mats.
What do you? Yeah. So what do you like? What would it be to? You've talked a little bit on the show about your own perspective with sexuality, and it is like in the last 10 or 15 years, we sort of there's been more public conversation about, like, you know seemingly or ostensibly straight women who are have committed or in committed relationships with the men, but maybe have another aspect to their sexuality that either has been explored and has been shelved, or has not been explored. But like, what would it be to, you said this book didn't really satisfactorily address the there's a thing this book didn't do when it came to gender that another book could do, and I'm not totally sure I understand what either of those would be. Like, what
Yeah.
did
Well,
this book fail to
it's,
do? What would you want another book to do?
I think it's that thing in the little section of where she quotes him. Where she says, she'll make you suffer in the end. And then she says, sorry, just let me find it again. She'll make you suffer in the end, he said, not meanly, but as if reporting something true about women in love and what they do. And that raises a huge question about, is it different to be in love with a woman as a woman? How different is it? Like, obviously, it is different, but how different is it? Is the damage that this person did to Maggie Milner and the damage that Maggie did to her, is there something feminine about that? Is it something that like only women can do to each other? Is it safer to be with a man? She talks later on about taking on his persona in the relationship and becoming this like conduit between her two lovers.
Yeah.
Those questions are just kicked up, but they're not answered.
And it's also
And
worth noting that, like, he says she'll hurt you in the end. She's the one who says, as if saying something about women. So he
yeah, yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
say
yeah. She
women do
introduces
this.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's her. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it seems like the way she gets hurt in the second relationship is not so different from the way you could get hurt in a straight relationship. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's something. I don't know. Maybe I'm failing to remember, or I'm missing. But it seemed like it was not. Didn't seem so peculiarly lesbian in its pathos.
Well, no, but the thing is, it's not up to us to answer that. It's up to her. She's the one who's introduced the question.
Right.
Like, if you're going to set this up, I need to sleep with a woman. Okay, why?
Yeah.
What is it? What are you looking for?
It does feel like what she wanted was sort of to be in love and be sort of, that's the Henri Cole line. I want love to trample through my arms again. Like,
Totally understandable.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, that's great. That's hard for boyfriend number one to live with, and
Sure, yeah.
probably not workable. But yeah, there's nothing to be worried about with that. But yeah, I do. It's strangely regressive to me. This book, it's like
Wait, what's the regressive part? Help me
just
out with that.
like I was with a boy, I need to be with a girl, and it's got to be a girl. Something about that just seems, I don't know. But then, like, I
Oh,
also
okay. All right.
completely understand that. So it just,
Yeah, I mean, well, you're the person who's had some experience here. Like, does that so you can understand longing, you can understand having a specific attraction, but you don't uh, having experienced attraction to both men and women, you don't feel, what does not make sense to you is like a generalized feeling of being pulled toward one sex or the other.
look, I don't know. I'm tying myself into knots here because I kind of think both things at once. On the one hand, it's like, yeah, totally, I get that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think there are just people.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I'm just thinking of, like being like a 14-year-old boy, and like there were girls I had crushes on, but also like I was just like, what God did this to the inside of my body that's making, like, what's happening that makes this, like, it sort of, it's like it, as with the Melissa Bank line, like you could be anyone. Like, it might have been a very generalized form of woman that I was being tormented by in my dreams.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
relate to
and it
that
does seem
too.
like
Yeah.
partly there's, I mean, partly just the nature of any long-term relationship is that the most appealing thing is just something new, right? The newness of it, and
Right.
maybe the newness of it, maybe it's easier to, like, I think like Freud overstated his case very often, but I think what is true is that we sometimes have desires, and we translate those desires into more palatable versions of themselves. And so
Mm.
maybe there's a desire for something new, there's a desire for exciting sex, a desire for being in love and being lusted after in a way that is, that's native to new attraction, and to let that rear its head in the form of, like, I want another man to fuck me, it would feel too treacherous, right? It would feel too much like, oh, this is like, but I love my boyfriend, I don't want to, but so I think like maybe it was sort of like the sexy dream women could sneak into the room, under cover of innocence in a way that sexy dream men couldn't. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I feel like I should put myself more completely on the line because I don't want to sound like an asshole. But yeah, I think it's a little bit like parents can sometimes say to somebody like me who doesn't have kids, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can have kids, don't have kids, like, whatever.
Yeah.
But as someone without kids, I can still sit there and be like, yeah, but I don't know what that's like. Like, I'll never
Sure.
know. I don't know what it's like. And so as somebody who's had sex with women and men, I can be like, it doesn't matter. Like, do
Oh,
not
right. Yeah.
stress
Yeah.
about it. But if you haven't and you want to, you'll be like, well, fuck
Right.
you. I want to have that experience. Like,
Yeah.
don't dismiss it. Don't make it seem small.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to
Yeah.
uh
I've been to Six Flags. It's no big deal. Don't worry about it. You don't need to go.
you don't need to go.
Yeah. I went for you. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm trying to sort of get at is like, why for Maggie Milner, like, is it just she wanted a new experience, or is it Is it really about women? And if it's really about women, I really would love to know why. And I
Well, all
never
right.
really
Also,
get that.
like, maybe I don't know if this is a defense of the book or not, but part of what I did like about this book that felt, again, and maybe again this is my like defensive expectations, but like this, what this book did not seem to be about was a book about relationships or about lesbians or about straight women. It seemed to be a book about a thing that happened to her.
Yeah,
And like,
which is
so
probably
the,
to its credit,
yeah, like
actually.
the
Yeah.
man doesn't ever end up being a symbol of men, nor does the cool hip lesbian, object of desire become really anything other than like this particular instance of this person. And same with her. Like,
Mhm.
she's a mess, but she also, like, I think, I'm sure, like, plenty of people I'm sure can relate to her, but she doesn't seem to be presenting herself as anything other than the like like you know tussle headed lady lying on the bed in the
White t-shirt.
back
Yeah,
jacket.
yeah.
Yeah.
Look, the
uh
author photo is very distracting to both of us.
I mean, it's a strong choice. I think, just like, putting a jacket together, you make a choice, and that's a
Yeah,
strong
yeah,
one.
yeah. Yeah. Let me read this last bit because I think this kind of gets at this question we're circling around, because there's doubt on her part as well about like, why the hell am I writing this book? What am I doing? Okay. This is at the very end after she's broken up with the cool lesbian. Then I was the only person in my bed, though other people's words ran through my head and kept me company. One was Vivian Gornick, who demanded, "Put romantic love at the center of a novel today, and who could be persuaded that in its pursuit, the characters are going to get to something large?" She argued that in modern life, we buy neither the plotline of the happy wife nor the one where women self-discover, so to speak, by dint of some new lover. We're too atomized, our institutions too clearly corrupt. Everything we do, we think we have to do ourselves. But she was speaking about prose and the theory that characters should actualize rather than transform as many times as time allows, as is the case in verse, where there are barely any characters at all. In poetry, then, let me say that love has been, above all things, the engine of self-knowledge in my life. And even after everything, is still what makes the rest worth suffering.
Yeah.
She like, I get to the end of these and I'm like, ah, yeah, okay. I don't
Yeah.
know. I feel so like sort of, they've got this like effect on me where I'm just like, all
Yeah.
right, I
She,
agree with you.
she keeps going after that, a couple more sections, and so
Yeah.
there's some, I mean, so, yeah, like, there's, I mean, again, like, they're good, and there's good and there's bad. There's like decent, pop philosophizing, and appalling pop philosophizing. But again, it just feels like she just left the whole first draft in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't really imagine, like, what would she do if she were to revise. I mean, not that I can't imagine things to revise, but like, where is the evidence of revision if she revised? Like, what choice did she make to? I mean, it does seem like, and like, zero people who have ever had a thought about a poem worked on this book. I don't like, I don't know. Like, it just, it seems like it was, is this, so, all right, without the device of being in rhyming couplets, this book couldn't exist because it would be too mundane. It would also be way too short, because a book of poetry, there's a lot of white space, and you can kind of spread all these words out and make it fill up 100 pages and feel like, oh, it's a good poetry book. But if you were to compress all of it into prose, and there is a lot in prose, if you were to compress all of it into prose, you would lose the conceit of the title and the cuteness of saying, like, oh, it's a story told in rhyming couplets. uh but is there much you would lose artistically? Like, how much does this need to be in poetry? There is a little bit of like, you feel like the verse maybe kept her the same way that it sometimes leads her down this funny rabbit hole where she talks about like when she's watching the lesbians smoke their vapes and
Oh yeah,
imagining
the
little men
vaping
running
bit
back
is
and she
bizarre. Yeah.
imagines little elves inside the vapes running back and forth lighting the and just like stop, just get out of this. What are you doing? You chased a rhyme and it led you to like vape
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
elves. But it
Can I read
like
that bit?
yeah, sure.
Uh, I'd zone out and imagine that a tiny person lived inside each cartridge who would sprint to switch the light bulb on and fan the fire when she felt a drag. She must get so tired, I would think. This elaborate e-cig reverie was not so different from my theory of her life, which, because unknown, was also marvelous and false, complete invention. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know why we're talking about that, but
Well, no, but I think
okay.
like the same this like you see like the same thing that happens in verse, which is that it's easy to get pulled into an eddy and just twirl around in some weird little, tangential thought. What's also true is that it can keep you moving.
Yeah,
And so
yeah, yeah, yeah.
she does manage to whip through the story in a way that is a little bit lighter and quicker than she maybe would be able to otherwise. I mean, I think it's almost like you have the advantage of like parabolic writing where you can sort of frame things a little bit more in like slightly more fairy tale terms so that you're able to just move the story along and you don't have to paint the whole room, you don't have to set the whole scene, you don't have to elaborate on everything, you can just
Mm,
go. And so some of
yeah.
that is like some of the charm is in that it's just really quickly telling you. I mean, it really like the pleasure of this book for me was almost indistinguishable from the pleasure of good gossip.
Pretty much completely. Yeah. I
Like
mean, good gossip
a
would be
really
better.
good story that like about a personal experience that somebody told you one on one with the kind of the speed that you get when you're getting like spoken, narration rather than, scripted narration in a novel. But also like what's exciting about it is that some of it is familiar, some of it is a little bit shocking, uh, but also imaginable. And it's just sort of interesting to find out what happened next. Do you
Yeah.
think, how do you think our experience would change if this were explicitly fiction? Even if like the form was exactly the same, but it was
But
like
that's,
definitely fiction.
yeah, no, that's kind of what I'm trying to say is like if this were fiction, you wouldn't write this book now because
Yeah.
this story is no longer interesting in the way it was when Chasing Amy was a movie that people cared about.
The
I
the
know that they're different, like narratively quite
yeah.
different,
But
but
like
like I'm just trying
the
to get at that.
conceit of
Yeah.
like woman sleeps with men and women and like goes back and forth or like has a crisis, goes from one to the other.
Yeah.
That in
Or even
itself
just
is not.
like,
But
yeah.
is when you say like that's not. Like I think everything about this book, all of the variables had to be in place in order for it to get published and praised the way it did. But I'm wondering like, do you think so it definitely would not have gotten published if it were just mere fiction that had nothing to do with her life, or if like you know I wrote this book, it would not, like it would not for a number of reasons would not be the same thing. But like, do you think the experience of reading it is like how much do you think it depends on the really having happenness of Maggie Milner doing all this?
Yeah, no, completely. It completely depends on that. And it completely depends on her gender and the gender of the lovers. Like if Maggie Milner, the person, left her initial boyfriend for another guy and wrote this book, it doesn't get published. Uh, if she's already with a woman and then she leaves that woman for another woman, it doesn't get published. But it's still totally weird to me that we want this story. And if it's fiction, it doesn't get published. It's really just a good drink with a girlfriend. Like
Yeah.
it's just a really good night out and you get to be like, "What? Oh no, you broke up with him and then she was awful to you. That's terrible. How do you feel now? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Oh, you've got a new boyfriend. Okay, great." It's good.
There's one of Joanna's favorite podcasts is called Normal Gossip.
Oh
You
yeah,
know
you were
this?
telling me about this. It sounds
Yeah.
great.
And like
Yeah.
it's two women, and one of them, they get letters in from people, emails in from people with just these elaborate stories, and then they kind of like learn them, and then one of them tells the story to the other, to a guest, I think, who comes on. But
Such a
but
fantastic premise.
it's
Oh,
very engrossing. They're like great like car trip, recordings. But you leave those and you don't take much with you, right? You
yeah, no,
don't
yeah.
carry much of that along with you after it's over.
Mm.
um all right, so I want to ask you a question that uh you are both qualified to answer and maybe like ideologically compelled to object to. um how would our experience of this book change if Maggie Milner were not attractive?
Yeah,
Like with
no, I
that
was thinking
photo on
about
the
that
back,
before.
like the, or like
Yeah,
if
yeah.
there is like, if there's no photo, there's a difference, but also like if there is a photo and she's not attractive.
Well, I was thinking about that before we signed on and watching that Brown talk. I'm like, well, she's fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
So like, if she's not attractive, I don't know. Maybe this is the worst thing I've ever said, but I don't think the book gets published.
Oh, well, I think that's also like, that's related not only to like the mere publication of this book, but like I don't want to impugn her in any way, but I think like inevitably appearance plays a role in like the existence and cultivation of social circles. And so like even her like existence in the scene that she's part of is in part at least affected by her appearance, as it is for everybody with everybody's appearance. But
Mm,
do you think like assuming it were published, how do you think it would change our experience
mm.
of the story?
Yeah, that author photo.
Because I will say that I spoke to another friend, a man who said it was, he found it like enjoyable in a kind of like a light way, and he said like, oh, it's kind of hot, it was kind of like, like, kind of sexy to read. And
Mm.
I found it engrossing, and she is very beautiful, but it didn't, yeah, like it didn't strike me in that way, although it didn't for the most part do the thing that we've talked about a number of times with like bad sex writing. Like it didn't make me, I think Joanna's term, the way she puts it, is like it didn't make me want to turn into a robot and never feel a human emotion again. um but it didn't like it wasn't stirring to me in that way, so I don't know if,
No, me neither. Me neither.
yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Um, yeah. It's a difficult question that you have asked me. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a different experience. I don't know how different, like in what way it's different.
Is
Ugh.
sandalwood cologne a thing with lesbians? Because I feel like
Yeah.
I've
Oh,
I've
yeah.
encountered that in my own encounters with
Yeah.
lesbians.
Oh God, I was so obsessed with that as a teenager. Just
What?
like
Where does that
need
come
to
from?
smell mostly like a guy, but a little bit like a woman.
Right. Well, which was partly like because I had a kind of an odd extended flirtation with a woman who was basically a lesbian, but there was something there back in Baltimore, and I know like part of what always made me feel a little bit confused was the sandalwood cologne. Like, whoa, but
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is, it's a
No,
little more
no.
masculine than I would normally, yeah, get this close to.
What does it mean?
Right,
Oh
right, yeah,
no.
what's happening? Uh,
What I kept thinking when I was over there, I kept seeing this book around, and I know that she lived in Brooklyn for a time. I don't know if she still lives there, but what does it feel like to walk around and see this book with these two relationships? And, she said in this talk at Brown, like she really, really still cares about these people a lot and wants to protect them and made sure that they're anonymous and stuff like that. But God, it's a lot to have in a book that's in
yeah, yeah,
bookstores.
yeah. What is it like for her? I mean, she also has the consolation of prestige and fame and like success and financial,
She'll
yeah,
be okay.
remuneration.
I
Yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah.
stay up at
It also
night
makes me
thinking about
wonder
it.
like, you know, the if the if the two love interests still live in the area. What it's like for them to.
Yeah, well, probably they're the ones I should be thinking about more. Yeah, completely. Yeah, what a weird time. What a weird time. So it was two friends of yours who asked you to look at this?
Yeah, to a couple. So a guy
Okay.
I went to graduate school with, and his I don't know. We're all old. I mean, not old, but like she's younger, but girlfriend starts to feel strange at a certain point.
Right,
So
right.
and partner is, I think probably he would say partner. I
Okay.
always that always feels strange to me too, because I can't quite get the business connotations out of my head. But
Yeah, fair enough.
yeah. But his woman, that's fine to say, right?
Right.
He's her man, and she says, no, that doesn't sound, that makes it worse. Yeah, but they I think they had some, she does poetry, he does fiction. I think there was some disagreement between them about it. So but like,
Okay.
yeah, like my it made me like, it is as incompetent and annoying prosodically and poetically as I expected, but it made me like angry at most contemporary poetry books for being like not remotely as entertaining as this was.
Yep. Yeah, completely. Like, have some fucking fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like,
Anybody
in a way, it was like
in America.
it was like a good spoken word like reading. Like, it's, I don't
Yeah.
want this, but it's so much better than like a normal
I
boring
can,
page poetry reading.
yeah, I can hear all the words and they're moving
Right.
around and there's
There's like stuff
lighting.
to care about and things happen,
Yeah.
and then there's like, you there's a, you know, that's the line. I know I've cited before, the old director friend said that the first job of an actor is to create interest, and like, she creates interest. You
Absolutely.
want to
Yeah, from the
know
very
more.
beginning.
And even,
Absolutely.
and it's not all, storytelling and plot. Some of it is, she makes it interesting to worry about what's happening inside these relationships. So even when she goes back and is nostalgic, or goes back and feels guilty, or goes back and examines, like, you do care about the relationships in this book, at least for the time you're reading it. Maybe not very
Yeah.
long after that, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've been thinking about it for so long now that I've become strangely attached to it. And I know that after this, I'll go put it on the actual shelf and not in the cardboard box where I keep all the other books. But yeah, probably
What's that breakdown? How does that work?
there's
Which
like the books that I've either been given or have bought for some research reason that I don't actually like and want to keep. I don't want to actually look at them. They got to go in a box. And then there's books I like.
Okay,
They go on the shelf.
business books, where, yeah, like,
Business
yeah,
books.
right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And then
Um,
fun books, or like pretty books, or like books for rereading.
yeah, or just books I'm
Okay.
attached to. And I'm attached to this now. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm still confounded by it. And I still just think it's funny that we want to, it's, ooh, lesbians. Like, come on, get a
That,
grip.
well, and that, to me, that was the least appealing part of it. Like,
Yeah,
that was the
yeah, yeah.
part that was part, like, I'm gonna say, like, I hate lesbians, but like I would not have read it if I had not been prompted to. And it was in part my, I think, here's what I was really afraid of, which is not the worst thing to be afraid of, but like, I thought it would be a woman who'd been with a man saying, I was with a woman. Oh, I discovered this is what I really needed. I'm with a woman, and that's wonderful. And let me tell you how wonderful this true discovery I made is. Not that that's something bad. Like, that's great if that's true for you, and I want that to be true for you. But the generalized you, but it just sounds so boring to me.
Mm.
And I think that, I mean, partly because I feel the same way. What was I talking to Joanna about the other day, where we were like, it was some, it was probably a movie we were watching, or some reality thing. Selling Sunset is back on. She's very excited, and she wanted me to let you know that
Oh,
it
thank
is
you. Good to
it
know.
is boy, if you want to radicalize a communist, that's a great show to show them. Like, you will
Yeah, yeah.
definitely be convinced that we need like a radical restructuring of the tax bracket system if you watch that show. but one of the thoughts I have. But there was something about like it was it's typical like 50-year-old man leaving his wife and taking up with a 20 something. And I think like what I'm always so appalled by in those cases is there's plenty to be appalled by, there's plenty to object to, but the like sincere expression of like having discovered something, like, oh, but I'm just in love with her, she's just,
Mm.
it's true love, I can't deny it. And like what I always want to say is like, that's what like being initially infatuated with a hot person is. Like that's what that is. That's not a discovery. Like that is what happens, and then you can go do that and like blow your life up, and like, but that's what that experience is. Like, of course. And so
Yeah.
part of
Yeah.
me feels like she's just doing that. But then like, as you said, like there's also this other thing that maybe she needed to discover. And she's also what,
Well,
like 28. So like, what are you talking about? It's like, you just a kid, do whatever you want.
do whatever you want. But no, but she is clear-eyed, I think, about the way that she gets attached to this girl. She's
Yeah.
like, this is not good. This is obsession. This is, I
Yeah.
don't feel safe. I feel fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
her
it's
like,
all,
yeah. Well, the
it's
way she
difficult.
buried, yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
And it's just really difficult because it's a polyamorous relationship as well. So she's constantly getting
Oh
left
God, I
for
forgot
other
about that.
people. Oh, awful.
Clarify for my bewilder. We had a conversation the other day where a peer friend of ours who is very literate and well educated didn't know what pegging was, and it made a certain exchange confusing. Um, for those who might not understand how polyamory differs from other types of not condoned by the Catholic Church sex having, would explain what that is, if you would.
I don't know if I'm really qualified to, but my understanding of it is that it's having committed relationships with more than one person at a time.
I think that seems, but like not, well, yeah, like in a different tone of voice than the Mormons. Like with
Yeah,
like
yeah,
with different
yeah, yeah,
music
yeah.
on and different costumes. And
Yeah,
and typically not only in one, direction.
yeah, but I think it looks pretty different depending on who's doing it.
I mean, it looks wildly different depending on who's doing it. It makes like all the difference in the world. Yeah, of course.
I mean, couple to couple, like two polyamorous couples probably have like a totally different setup
Yeah,
to each
yeah,
other. But what the fuck would I know? I don't know.
yeah. But yeah, so the lesbian, when she gets together with her, the lesbian has other people she sees periodically, and the Maggie Milner is sort of feels lonely in those periods. It does seem like she, like what the stuff you were describing earlier on, where she like loses herself into her relationship with the man. Whether or not that is a something that is endemic to like straight relationships historically, it seems like in her case that's something she's sort of ready to do with anybody. Like she's ready to sort of start doing that with the woman as well. And then it just, things go slightly differently.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
remind me, what is the actual, because eventually the lesbian interest does does sort of go steady with her, so to speak.
yes. She asks her to be exclusive
Right.
after they've been met the family and all.
Right. And then
Uh, yeah.
what finally goes to shit? I forget.
Um, they just start fighting a lot.
Right.
Let me
It
find that
stops
bit.
being fun and
Do you mind if I read
please,
this
please,
bit as
please.
well?
Yeah.
All right, this is 4.9. Okay, so nothing lasts. The proof of life is in the aching. It was long and torturous, our breaking, like our beginning, torturous and long, gored by fights and scored to every song from Diamond Life. I hope someday an archivist will pull our texts out of the nuclear detritus to display. This is the sentimental stuff, they'll say, of Homo sapiens in love. In one, I praise the wild face she made in sex. In others, we share travel plans. Trieste, Taipei, hunking hut to hut around Lake Como. Broke, we looked at maps instead in Soho. Every conversation ends in arguing on some familiar theme: saying versus doing, money versus wealth, and whose was whose. What to do about the virus in the news if one day it spread to North America. Her tongue, my groove, her ex, my grudge, etc. And at the root of it all, the fundamental conflict we could never see enough to interdict, which had to do with lust and power and belief, with who at any moment held the leash, the upper hand. So when, just blocks from where we jabbered about Middlemarch the year before, in a living room in Bed-Stuy with our playlist on, she finally said, I just can't give you what you need. It might have been the first time we'd agreed.
Well, that is nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good, just really good at a closing couplet.
There's some bad ones, but yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
And I thought like the line, the money versus wealth and whose was whose, what to do about the virus in the news. That sounds almost like Auden there. She also rhymes Lake Como with Soho in this section, so you see the full range of like achievement and failure here. But yeah, that's a nicely done. Something I think she like does manage to pull off in a storytelling sense is just establishing that little encounter early on when she first meets this woman, that you do get a little bit of a sense of like the luminous internal geography of a relationship, where like coming back through, you can, which is true of the first relationship too, but like there are a couple ways in which you get some of that sense of like the past blowing through into the present. Like one of the things I really enjoy about getting toward the end of a narrative is the feeling of like reality stacking up, and like that you have, even if it's for you only like an afternoon or an hour since you encountered this, you start to have that feeling of the lived in past coming back.
Yeah.
Could this be, how much better a book could this be if she'd done 2 drafts? Or she'd done like multiple
No,
drafts? Like,
but that's the thing, right? It falls apart as soon as you touch it. Like, this is a house of
okay.
cards. You cannot edit this book. If you look at it with that critical eye, you will just burn it. You cannot. You can't make it better. You can only make it worse.
Right.
All the charm of it is in the fact that it's immediate. It's like the first thought.
Right.
Sexiest thought.
Yeah. It's like the passionate email you get to the end of and hit send without proofreading.
That's right. And you're like, oh,
Like
what the fuck
if you
did I say?
you would never have sent it. Yeah.
That's right. But it's great. But it's great because it's alive and it's like humming, but it's also full of terrible things.
Yeah.
Can I read you a little tiny bit of Bluets?
Yeah.
I'm reaching for it without you saying
No.
yes.
My inclination for Andrew and Liza, I don't even know what their precise disagreement was or who was on which side, though I have some guesses. I am inclined to say they're both right. Like,
Yeah.
almost like whatever your opinion about this book, you're probably right. That, yeah.
Agreed.
Like,
Yeah.
whatever you hate about it, you're right to hate about it. And whatever you love about it, I think you're probably also right to love about it. And just that there is anything to love about it sets it, above the herd.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible.
And infuriating. But yes, we're reaching Bluets.
I just wanted to just for contrast in terms of like the writing, because I have no doubt that Bluets went through like years and years of drafting. This is my favorite little piece of it. They're just numbered. This is number 72. It is easier, of course, to find dignity in one's solitude. Loneliness is solitude with a problem. Can blue solve the problem, or can it at least keep me company within it? No, not exactly. It cannot love me that way. It has no arms. But sometimes I do feel its presence to be a sort of wink. Here you are again, it says, and so am I. I don't know. It's probably a bit more cumulative than like comes across in that little bit, but there's also some very sexy bits in it.
Yeah, read us a sexy bit. Why not?
Oh, it's going to take me forever to find it. Talk about something else while I.
Well, so something I do wonder, and I don't know Maggie Nelson's writing well or really at all, except for the smart people I know who admire her. But my understanding is she writes almost entirely in prose,
Mm.
and I know Bluets is sort of prose poetry, but like I have noticed a fair number of poets who publish, exclusively or chiefly as poets, publishing some poems or some books or some things in prose, and there is a natural inclination to call those prose poetry unless they are obviously memoir, or I mean, really it's sort of like memoir or poetry, and if it's prose but not memoir, it's probably prose poetry. And so
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
which
Yeah.
I kind of understand that, even if I still have some questions. But if she mostly publishes prose and then she publishes a book of prose poetry, how do we like? Does she just say this is prose poetry?
I mean, it's pretty disjointed. That helps a bit.
Good. All right. It's confusing, and that we don't.
It's confusing, and
Right.
there's no
Helpful.
real like through line. But yeah, I would also recommend Anne Boyer's The Undying as a that's prose poetry.
What's the title?
Um, it's called The Undying.
Okay.
It's her book about having stage 4 breast cancer.
Hmm.
I mean,
And I realized this suddenly became this is like I asked you to read a sexy bit for Bluets, which suddenly means like this is now a test of what Alice finds sexy.
yeah,
It's
which
like
it's not
not
like
what
I was
you're
going to
asking
find
for.
the bit that I actually thought was, yeah. Give me like another minute, and otherwise I'll just read this one bit. Um,
Let's read. I'll read the very beginning of this book,
Thank you.
which did seem. Well, I'll read it first. Proem. So like there's some of it is like self-consciously a throwback to another time when it was maybe more common to write narrative in verse, and proem is a term you don't hear much except when literary people are reaching for a novel word to use. This little brief introductory moment before the story begins. I became myself. Line break. I became myself. That's the first couple. It's just those two. No, I always was myself. There's no such person as myself. I wouldn't have to turn my eye inward, I thought, if I could train my eye on him, the one I loved. But I was wrong. My eye loved everything it fell upon. And then one day it fell upon a mirror, and he was nowhere in the mirror, and she was everywhere. That I think she had to have written that after the fact. Like I think she wrote that
Yeah.
like wanting to summing up, because there's just nothing there. You just don't get anything there.
Yeah, it's not, it's
Um,
bad. It's very bad.
yeah.
That's not
Uh,
part of the email. That's like the read my last email. I apologize for what I said to you earlier. Okay,
right. Yeah.
I
Here's
found the
what
bit
I
I was
was really
thinking
trying to say. Oops, never mind. This is more confusing than the original.
of. I am
This
making
email
things
will
worse.
require another apology. Yeah. Yeah, I almost
Yeah,
wonder,
okay.
like, yeah, the book could almost start with that passage you initially read. So I asked to sleep with women.
Yeah,
Um,
start
like
there.
that could almost, yeah, just we can
Dive
pick up
in.
most of it on the way.
I don't know if this is sexy, but she just says fuck a lot, so I suppose that's worth
Always
reading.
sexy. It's impossible to say fuck a lot without being sexy.
Yeah, this is number 48. 48. Imagine, for example, someone who fucks like a whore, someone who seems good at it, professional, someone you can still see fucking you in the mirror, always in the mirror, crazy fucking about 3 feet away in an apartment lit by blue light, never lit by daylight. This person is always fucking you from behind in blue light, and you both always seem good at it, dedicated and lost unto it. As if there is no other activity on God's given earth your bodies know how to do except fuck and be fucked like this in the dim blue light in this mirror. What do you call someone who fucks this way? I don't know. It's it's like the thing about like the thing that's similar with both these books is like in Bluets, Maggie Nelson is in a horrible relationship with someone she's totally sexually obsessed with, And that's the same problem that
Mm.
Maggie Milner comes up against. Like, she knows that this woman is not treating her well. She has a great line about how she'd run out without a word because she had forgot she had a thing, stuff like that. Not cruel, though often maddening, and far below what I'd expected out of him. That's so interesting. Like, what do you mean by that? So you're letting your girlfriend get away with shit that you wouldn't let your boyfriend get away with? What are you
Yeah.
doing? Like, let's talk about that.
Don't, yeah. I feel like I often hear I mean, I like very often hear the opposite set forth, right? That like men are held to lower standards than women in relationships and
Yeah,
interactions.
yeah. So that's fascinating. Why
Yeah,
is
that
she allowing that?
still
But I
trying
guess
to
she
think of the
can't.
answer to that question.
Mm.
What do you
I
call?
mean, who knows, right? We don't have to
Yeah,
answer it. She should
yeah,
answer. She should answer
yeah.
it. She
Right.
should
No, well,
answer
sure.
it in
Yeah,
her
yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it is it is yeah, I'll say like I don't know if it's sexy, but it is hard to immediately forget, and it doesn't make me cringe and hate sex. I
No,
just feel
yeah.
yeah.
To be clear, the whole book is not like that. Like, there's just these moments of, you gets window into um the horror of that relationship, and then she'll pull back and she'll talk about like the blue that is found only in the Tuareg tribe or something like that.
That didn't seem like
It's great.
horror
It's a great
though. It
book.
seemed like that was, unless I misunderstood, that seemed like maybe that was a horrible relationship. Maybe he was or she was horrible in that relationship, but it didn't seem like that was a scene of horror she was describing.
No, I mean, she just builds up a picture of how deeply miserable she is, but unable to.
Sorry, I was thinking of the
Yeah,
first part, not the part about
yeah,
leaving and not say like with short notice and that kind of thing. Yeah, that does sound
yeah.
good.
It's just a great breakup book because it's like the whole book is looking back at the wreckage and then thinking, how did I get there and how do I get over it? Because she just, even though she knows that he wasn't good for her, she just can't put it down.
There was some, I feel like early on in our friendship, there was some thing of hers that you suggested reading, and then I was slow to read it, and then you said, "Oh, never mind, we shouldn't talk about this. It'll get us
Yeah,
both in trouble."
On
Yeah.
freedom, which is
Should we
just,
still never talk about that, or should
it's
we?
just too uh it's just a mess. The review of it in the London Review of Books starts, why is Maggie Nelson writing this way? And it's just so devastating. And it is, it's like terrible. It's 4 chapters, or songs, as she puts it. There's a really great chapter on drugs, decent chapter on sex, and then a very depressing, terrible chapter on climate change, and one other that is totally forgettable, so I don't remember what it's about. But yeah, she's just like
What is
getting
the
so
way
far
she's
up her own
writing
ass.
that's like we're like because
It's
it's not like why is she writing about this? It's why is she writing this way?
Yeah.
What is the way?
The drugs chapter is good because she's nice and straightforward, but she's doing what I've heard described as auto theory, which is like, I'm
Auto
writing
theory?
theory, but I'm writing about it through my own life. So there's a lot of
Oh,
autobiographical detail here, but
terrible.
I'm also mentioning Bataille like a lot. Um, yeah, and it's just
Yeah.
so confusing and boring,
Has
and
she?
it's a shame.
I said she'd written fiction. Has she written fiction?
I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe,
Yeah.
but I don't think so.
Does this so that's a problem that I like. Memoir can occasionally be juicy to read or fascinating to read for for like historical reasons sometimes, uh but I do always wonder, like the two big dangers of memoir are like on the one hand exposing yourself and everyone you love, you know, in like a horrible way, and on the other hand having established yourself as a memoirist, then what, needing to like live more material,
Mm.
like needing to have more experiences that will then translate into good material.
Yeah, and with On Freedom, it sort of feels like Maggie Nelson has probably reached a point in her life where things are pretty good, and she doesn't need to.
Yeah.
write more memoir. So she writes this sort of turgid stuff. But I was talking to a friend who's also a writer the other day, and she was saying like when Maggie Milner gave this talk at Brown, the first question that she gets, of course, in the Q&A is, how do you walk the line between using your own life and right, what are the ethics here? And what I would want to do in that situation is to stand up and be like, there are no ethics. You're a writer. You want to use fucking everything, and you're a demon. Like, you're the
Yeah.
worst person in the room, and you are doing this for your own benefit.
Yeah.
You're a danger. No
You,
one should be your friend.
yeah, like you can do it, but you can't do it and still insist on being a good person. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, like you
So
have
stop pretending.
yeah, ethical memoir. Yeah, that does feel like, come on now.
Yeah, get a grip.
Just acknowledge that what you're doing is vampirism. Predictions for book number 2 from Maggie Milner.
Baby book.
Baby book? Wait, book about having a baby?
Book about having a baby.
Oh God, yeah, you're right. Yeah. In triplets? In what? In tersets?
If she has triplets, then maybe.
Well, no, but I mean, assuming there's a father, perhaps, which or other parent, I don't know. But yeah, like that's because that's the other thing is like it's not like it's mere brilliant storytelling, right? It's sort of all of the variables here.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
okay,
Maybe it's
I didn't say predictions for good second book from Maggie Milner. I did say predictions for a second book. But yeah, baby book is, I think that's a very
baby book. Crown of Sonnets, baby book.
That was my conversation with Alice. Again, the book is Couplets by Maggie Milner, which we endorse as much as the previous conversation suggests we do. The movie we mentioned at the very beginning, again, was Compartment Number 6. And that's, I think, a very full-throated endorsement. If you have questions or comments about this week's episode or anything else, you can reach me at sleerickets@gmail.com. And again, please do check out The Secret Show at sleerickets.substack.com. Thank you all for listening, and with any luck, I will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.